problem. I would like to introduce
Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Investigations Team.
Very informative, very interesting.
And welcome to another edition of Bigfoots Pad Paranormal Radio. On the lines with me right now, I have Tim, Nick, Brent, and myself, and our guest should be calling in any minute now. So how you guys all doing?
Doing good.
Very good.
Doing all right.
So yeah, today, would you like to give a preface to what today's show's about there, Nick?
Today we'll be talking to Michael Slade, the Nevada and Utah Bigfoot researcher who maintains a pretty well-known blog. He goes throughout the West Coast investigating various sightings and other phenomena related to Bigfoot. It should be a very exciting show. We had him on already before once, and it was a really exciting and informative experience, so I'm looking forward to this experience today. Are you guys?
Oh yeah, last time he was on was pretty exciting, so.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I was going to say, I think Mike's calling in right now. And, you there, Mike?
I'm here. How are you guys doing?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
Awesome.
Good to have you back on the show here.
Oh, it's fun. Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. This will be good.
Well, I was going to say, our chat room is filling up right now. We've had a lot of questions since last time you were on the show. I was going to say there's 4 of us on the phone right now with you, just in case you wondered how many people are on.
Oh.
But, to start the show off, I was going to say, is there any way that you could say your biography or what got you interested in Bigfoot research?
Oh, gosh. Well, at the risk of making a super long story, when I was a kid, my dad would take us up into the mountains west of Fort Collins, Colorado, and we would go camping up there. And I was born in 1968, and so, the early 70s was kind of the time when this whole Patterson film happened, and I should call it the Patterson-Gimlin film. I want to give Bob his just his reward, But, the In Search of show, and then the whole Star Wars thing with Chewbacca and $6 Million Man wrestling the Bigfoot alien robot thing, and I was just smitten and went to the library as much as I could and checked out every book that I could, and had this reoccurring nightmare, of course. I pumped my head full of all this Bigfoot stuff. I had this dream that would come back to me where Bigfoot would run down out of the mountains and reach his hand into my window in my basement and try and grab me. And at that point, I would wake up and scared to death, and the cycle would start all over again.
Huh. Well, I know that you said that you got into photography last time you were on the show, or you said you do that for a hobby?
Oh, no, I'm a professional photographer. I've been shooting for about 25 years. I've worked all over the world for big news agencies and for small little news agencies and magazines and whoever. But I've done that for most of my career. I did a lot of commercial photography up in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle and Portland. And now I've just, in the past year, I finished my Master of Fine Arts degree from Utah State University, and I've been teaching as an adjunct professor at Utah Valley University in Orem and at Brigham Young University in Provo. So right now my main emphasis is on teaching and teaching photography, but I'm also have a few commercial clients that I work with still, and I have several personal photographic projects that I'm working on long term.
So one thing I was wondering was, are you still doing the same Bigfoot project that you were doing last time we talked to you, or are you doing a different one now?
No, it's absolutely the same. In fact, just this last week, I was processing film for about 4.5 to 5 hours in the dark room, and was processing film for this Bigfoot project. So it's an ongoing thing. Stories continue to be discovered in Utah. People contact me, or they contact a couple of other associates that I have here in Utah, and we get their account. Other researchers do with that information what they want to. My two colleagues that I work with, and then I take that story and then I go out and I do my photography part, where I am more interested in the location and the scenery and what the place actually looks like. And then I match that up and display the photograph with the account from the eyewitness. So my project is a little bit different, but yeah, than the other two guys. I should say it's different than the other two guys, where they'll go out and they'll actually look for tree breaks and look for stick structures, and they'll look for footprints and scat and hair samples and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Where I'm really more concerned in the oral presentation of the story, or the written account of the story rather, where I can go and visit the location and then interpret the events, with a photograph, rather than, look for any discernible or provable remains or evidence or anything like that.
Well, one thing that I was curious about was, does your project have a name?
Oh, I don't know. I guess everyone's project has a name. It seems like this project and that project and this study and that, whatever. I just call it Utah Bigfoot just because I'm in Utah and I'm, trying to get stories about Bigfoot. My blog is called Utah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, you could go ahead. Sorry.
My blog is called Utah Bigfoot. If you Google search for Utah Bigfoot, it's the first hit, which I guess is one of my few claims to fame, if that counts as one. But yeah, I get in the grand scheme of things, it's not a lot of traffic to my website, but I get roughly 30 hits a day that come from all over the world that kind of see what I've come up with and what I'm presenting. It's been interesting. I kind of have been doing it on the slow, kind of methodical pace. With every day there's not an update every day. There's not a lot of stuff that comes through. The process that I'm working on, the technology, the older camera, with the film-based photography, and especially the gathering of the stories from these witnesses, sometimes can take months and months and months. And so I'll have maybe a little flurry of activity on my blog for 2 or 3 days, and then they'll go several weeks without any updates. But that's kind of how the project has evolved. I actually have registered UtahBigfoot.com, but nothing is there yet. So this might end up turning into more of a formal web presence than just having an ongoing blog type of a diary.
Oh, well, I'd like to interject with a question.
Go ahead.
Mike, we do investigations with Sasquatch as well, and you were talking about the different types of film, or different types of cameras, rather. In your investigations or your work, what do you prefer, digital or film, and what are the pros and cons to each?
Oh, boy, that's a discussion that we could go around and around and around. The pro for me is, well, I have a long lecture about this, and if you wanted to hear the whole thing, you could sit in on my class and you could fall asleep along with the rest of the kids. But I think for me, what it boils down to is I'm a more formal photographer where I go out and I study the land and I listen to what the landscape tells me, and I kind of see what the light's doing and where the wind is blowing and all that kind of artsy fartsy stuff. And the big camera that I'm using is a camera made by a gentleman in Arizona. His name is Keith Canham. It's a handmade camera patterned after an old design from the turn of the century. It's a very large camera, and it shoots large negatives. The negatives that I'm shooting for this project are 4 inches tall by 10 inches wide. The camera requires a tripod. A lot of times the exposures are quite slow, up to 30 seconds at a time. So it's a very slow, thought-out, methodical process. Additionally, each picture takes the piece of film that I shoot costs $3 or $4 a sheet. So I usually will only go and make 1 or 2 pictures at the most. And then when I print these photographs, the amount of material that I used to print them with costs roughly $8 or $9. So I don't go shoot a million pictures and then come back and then just choose one. I go and I read the story. I take the story with me. I get a feel for what the witness had happen to them. I walk around and see where I can place my camera in the landscape to kind of get a feel for what was there, what happened while they were there. And then I'll wait for the nice light and then make my photograph and then leave. And hopefully what was felt by the witness, certainly I can't recreate screams or trees breaking, or I can't recreate a smell, but I can try to replicate somewhat a season of the year or a time of the day, and hopefully that will come through in the photograph to the viewer when they look at the photograph and then read the story. So that's why I use film. Digital schmigital, that's what I say. Digital is great. My commercial clients love it when I shoot digital. It's very fast. It's very cheap. They can get results, instantaneously. I can FTP them very large files that they can retrieve, whenever they want to. The downfall with digital for me is it's not permanent. There's no guarantee that anything we do with digital technology will last more than 30 or 40 or 50 years. Some people are saying that there's going to be a cultural black hole of information that will start around 1995 and it will end, they're predicting, probably around 2030 or 2040 before we're able to get digital storage devices that can be relied upon to last a very long time. So I like the idea that the record that I'm taking forces me to slow down, and I like the idea that the record that I'm making will last longer than a generation or two.
That's some great information, because, as I was saying, we go out and shoot a lot of pictures in our investigations, and we probably should take that into to some type of mental note, perhaps, so we can enhance our investigations. It's always great to have tips from an expert like you.
Well, here would be my suggestion, and this is what I tell my students that are digital photography, fans. And I appreciate the digital technology. I was a very early adopter, and I'm staring at $40,000 worth of digital camera equipment right now. I won't tell you where it's located, but you get the picture. I tell my students that if you're a digital fan, and that's wonderful, as long as you're taking pictures, I don't care what technology you use, just take the picture. But if you want those pictures to last, you better get them out onto some hard medium. In other words, you better print that out on a piece of paper that will last with some inks that will last, or you better commit those images to some sort of a book form. And there are half a dozen to a dozen different purveyors of book manufacturers on the internet. Some are easier than others to use. A lot of stores have a service where you can email your images to them and they will print them for you. But if you want your images to last, you better get them out into some form of material that can be held by your hand. Because if you don't, you're trusting this technology that is frail and it's feeble and it requires a lot of upkeep and a lot of diligence to make sure that it will last. So that would be my advice. If you're a digital photographer, do those very, very limited steps at least to ensure that your photographs will last a while.
Okay.
Well, Becky, just one of our friends called into the line. I was going to say, Becky, did you have a question for Michael?
not at the moment. I just kind of, got in the middle of this. I guess he's talking about, how digital cameras or digital pictures aren't going to last, and how you need to have, more of an actual physical picture you can hold to make sure you get, keep your evidence. Is that? I just caught the last part of that. So.
Yeah, that's the general.
Oh, yeah,
that's my general suggestion for people is that they commit the digital picture to some sort of a printed media.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I never really thought about that actually. About digital stuff not lasting.
I was gonna say, I was gonna tell you, Michael. Do you want to call you Michael or Mike? I keep getting confused.
You know what? My friends call me Mike. My students, I make them call me Michael. It's like it's a more professional nom de plume, I guess, if we want to be more formal. But you can call me Mike if you'd like. That doesn't offend me at all.
That's why I wasn't sure. But the one thing I was going to ask you was, or no, not really ask you, but you said that your blog doesn't get that many hits, like 30 a day, you said, but your show 30, that you did with us last time actually has several thousands of listens. Just thought you'd like to hear that.
Oh, gosh.
It's actually one of our most popular shows we've had ever, to tell you the truth, so.
Oh, I'm flattered. Thank you very much. It's funny, my son and I, we drove up to Bear Lake this last weekend to spend the weekend with my family. For the President's Day, and we were driving down the street or through the canyon and down the highway and whatnot, and he asks me if I'm famous in the Bigfoot community. I said, I don't think so. Only 30 or 40 people come see my website a day. That hardly makes me famous. So that makes me, I guess, I better craft my responses a little bit better, knowing that there will be several thousand listens. That's kind of funny.
Well, a question that keeps coming up on our Facebook right now. Have you ever seen a Bigfoot? I know you said you didn't on the last show, but have you seen one now?
Nope, still haven't seen a Bigfoot. Still haven't seen a Yeti or a Sasquatch or anything else. I still look and I still listen, and every now and then when I'm out photographing, I'll make a call or a hoop or bang some sticks together, but I still haven't seen anything yet, which is kind of disappointing to me, but again, I think I'm still a little bit scared of it happening. I think the reality of it will just put me over the edge.
Well,
I'll tell you what, though, it's interesting listening to these people tell me their stories a lot of times firsthand now. I'm kind of turning into an interviewer of sorts, I guess, of these various people. But when they tell me their story, and I hear the seriousness in their voice and the conviction in the tone and timbre of their speech to me, I'm convinced that they saw something. I'm convinced that they saw something real. And I'm convinced that it's just a matter of time before I see one as well. So I don't know if I really am too concerned about not seeing one yet, but I think just going out, paying attention, watching, listening. I'm convinced that taking good photographs a lot of time is more about listening and paying attention than just setting up the camera and pushing the button. And I think that according to some other people that go out and look for Bigfoot, I think the strategy a lot of times can overlap. So I think it's just a matter of time. Plus, it's interesting that I actually go to the place where Bigfoot has been seen previously. I don't necessarily go out and kind of guess where I may see one, or I don't try to do any kind of habitat matching to see if I can encounter one, because that's not my focus of my research. My research places me in the location where one has been seen previously. So I guess the odds are that eventually, one may return, and if I'm there at the time that it returns, then something may happen to me.
Yeah.
So is your research primarily in Utah at the moment, or do you travel around?
Well, this weekend it was really interesting. I was up in Bear Lake, Utah, which is in the northeastern corner of Utah, and I drove through 3 different states, going to a couple of different locations to photograph over the weekend. I was in Idaho, then I was in Wyoming for a little bit, and then back down into Utah again. And I did that loop 2 days in a row. So I live in Utah. I live in the kind of the central Salt Lake Valley area of Utah. So I kind of have decided that Utah sightings are where I like to concentrate my efforts, just because that's where I live. But if I'm in an area of Utah where it borders a neighboring state up into Idaho or or Wyoming, or last year, or I guess it was 2 years ago when we spoke, I snuck down into Las Vegas again and photographed down there near Blue Diamond. So yeah, if I'm in an area where I'm passing through where there's a sighting report and a story that I can rely on, then yeah, I'll go check it out and I'll take a photograph.
Speaking of northeastern Utah, we were actually there doing an investigation last summer, though. We were actually up there. We went to, what was it? It didn't really have a name. It was over in Idaho, like 2 or 3 miles in Idaho, where we were at.
Near Preston?
I know. I mean, Logan's the closest town to where we were at, but we basically went off road, and we were like 2 or 3 miles into Idaho, like on unmarked roads.
Were you in the Franklin Basin area? Do you remember that name?
It was. I know Bear Lake was close by. I'm trying to think what it was called. It was called the Egan Basin. That's what it was called.
You were probably up in the Franklin Basin area. It's interesting. That's an area that I had photographed this past winter. The Friday after Thanksgiving, the Animal Planet crew was in Logan, and they had their town hall meeting, and so me and a bunch of other locals showed up and listened mostly to stories, and I took copious notes, and one of the stories that I heard was from a snowplow driver who saw one run across the road in front of him while he was plowing his snow, and it stopped long enough for him to be looking at him eye to eye from about a 30-foot or a 30-yard distance, I believe is what he said. And the interesting thing about this area or this particular section of road is that it joins up. It's kind of a canyon, and it's a popular off-road area for campers in the summer and for snowmobilers in the winter. So it's kind of a north-south corridor, and it runs up into Idaho, and that valley is called the Franklin Basin. 16 miles on the other end of that canyon, earlier in the morning, another snowplow driver, said he saw Bigfoot the same morning that the Utah snowplow driver said that he saw his. So that's probably, if you were in northern Utah this past year and you were near Bear Lake and Logan was the biggest town, you were in Logan Canyon and probably up in that Franklin Basin area. There's a lot of Bigfoot activity up in there, actually.
I was going to say, Brent, did you have a question for Mike?
Not at the moment, I don't. I'm still thinking of a question.
You're listening for now?
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, you said that the Animal Planet crew, were you talking about, is it for finding Bigfoot for that show? Was that what you were talking about?
Yep.
Okay, because I haven't seen that show. I've heard about it. I don't have cable right now, so I haven't actually seen it, but I've seen some people posting about it on Facebook. I haven't actually checked it out yet. Do you think it's something worth watching? Has it been? Have you been watching it?
I watch every episode with morbid curiosity. I think that I watch every episode really to learn what not to do. I think I'm interested. I'm interested more so. There's kind of two segments to every episode. They have a segment with the town hall where the individual stands up and they tell their experience, and then they have the segment where they go out and one of them spends the night out in the woods and tromps around, and then the gang goes out and they tromp around in the woods and they try and find Bigfoot. I enjoy the part where the people stand up and they tell their account. I enjoy the extension of that where they go out with the hosts and they recreate, to some degree their experience. That part of the show I find very fascinating because these are real people that have had real experience. I'm not so concerned with watching people walk around in the woods and try and find something that we know they're not going to find.
Yeah.
After watching, I was there for the town hall meeting, and after watching that meeting, I kind of decided that there's an interesting thing going on with that show in particular, and I've come to the conclusion that they are more interested in making a good television program than in finding Bigfoot. The finding Bigfoot, theme just happens to be the vehicle that they are generating a television show, and it's not the other way around. So if
that's interesting because
No, go ahead. I'm done.
Sorry for interrupting you, Mike.
Do we have a question in our chat room? One of our guests in our chat room was asking, so what percentage of Bigfoot sightings do you think are real? And another question he was asking earlier is, do you believe that Bigfoot might migrate through that Franklin Basin area? Those are the two questions.
I'm sure it does. That Franklin Basin Road is a major north-south corridor. It's a watershed that brings water down into the Logan River. It's a natural funnel for animals, mainly large animals like deer that we all think that Bigfoot must be eating. So I'm sure that there's a Bigfoot walking up and down that Franklin Basin Road. In fact, it's interesting. One of the people that I've spoken with that had an experience up in that Franklin Basin Road, he had a sighting, a visual sighting with an animal. And then later on in the year, he was camping with a buddy of his in that Franklin Basin area, and they heard screams 2 or 3 times over the course of one evening's camp out along that Franklin Basin Road. So I'm convinced that there are some animals that are going up and down that valley, living and migrating and moving around and staying hidden.
And his other question he was wondering was, what percentage of Bigfoot sightings do you think are real?
Oh, gosh. The people that I speak to generally...
Hey, you're starting to break up a little bit there. Your phone's starting to break up a little bit.
I'm going to say that... Let me check my battery. How good's the battery? Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now you're better.
I think probably 80 to 90% of these people have had a genuine experience. At least the people that I've spoken with here in Utah. And that's one of the things that interests me about these people that will take the time to write their experience down. If I find someone that says, yeah, I saw Bigfoot, and I ask them to, write their story down, or I email them and I ask them for information, and they never give that to me, I can kind of think that, well, maybe their story isn't that genuine. But then if I get a report from someone and we have a chat and we sit down or we talk on the phone, they can give me details and talk about their experience in a more extended manner. It's those little tiny details that tend to give me the impression that, yeah, their sighting report is real. It's a genuine occurrence. They saw something that they can't explain and they felt compelled enough to write it down.
Another listener question. He was saying, do you think that Bigfoot eats deer or plants, or what do you think that they eat?
Well, I'm not a scientist, and I don't pretend to be a scientist. They've got to eat something. Deer are everywhere. Plants are everywhere. So I kind of leave it up to the other guys that are more research-oriented to figure that out. I know humans eat deer, and deer taste yummy. I like to eat deer, and if a Bigfoot is smart, like we think that he is, I bet your bottom dollar that Bigfoot is eating deer. If they're not, they're an idiot. They're foolish because there are lots of them around.
Another thing I'd like to evaluate on this question. So what would you say that the desert Bigfoot eats versus the forest Bigfoot?
Well, this is interesting. This is something I've been dying to talk to you guys about ever since I went down to Blue Diamond. When we went down there, I should pull my Nevada map out and I'll tell you where I was, but we ended up on a road west of Prim, between Prim and Blue Diamond. It's a dead-end road, I think, or it's a gravel road. Anyway, I got up in there and we found a town, a little tiny town, and I was driving around and I stopped and I asked a local if the road went through, and he said, yeah, it did, but it's kind of rough. You may want to, we were just driving the Volkswagen, and so he said, you may just want to stay to the surface roads. I said, well, while I got you, let me ask you some questions, and I told him what I was, looking to do, and I started asking him about fresh water sources and about animals that a Bigfoot could eat. And he started to take me very seriously all of a sudden. He said, yes, we have seen that he hunts up in those mountains west of Prim. He hunts elk up in there, and he says there are dozens and dozens of elk up in here, lots of elk. And I said, tell me about fresh water. I mean, this is the desert. I lived in Las Vegas for 2 years. I've got extensive experience, four-wheel drive experience on the Mojave Road and in Death Valley and that area of the Southwest. I said, you tell me how much fresh water's up there. And I know there can't be very much. And he said, you'd actually be surprised. There's a lot of fresh water up in these mountains west of Prim. So So if a creature has fresh water and they have something to eat, protein source like deer and elk, surprising as it may seem, you drive down the street between Vegas and Barstow, or Barstow and Bakersfield, and you look out and you're like, there is no way anything's going to live out there. But according to this local that's lived there for umpteen years, there's plenty of food up there for a Bigfoot to eat. I was quite surprised, honestly.
That is pretty amazing.
Yeah. Did you have a question, Tim? Or did you want to ask Mike anything?
Well, I'm mostly just listening, but yeah, I remember when we spoke with you last time, you said you were heading out. I believe it was Thanksgiving to Vegas.
Yep.
Yeah, because I remember, I'm not sure if Jeremy got a hold of you then, but I remember you said you head up to Blue Diamond and everything, so we were just wondering if you interviewed anybody out there while you happened to be here.
We were kind of in a hurry, and my family fortunately tolerates my obsession. And so it was around dusk time, and we just kind of blew through Blue Diamond. We stopped on the side of the road, and I took a shot kind of overlooking this little town. And we didn't even really go into the town, and I didn't have time to speak to anybody. I did find a report on the internet somewhere. Maybe it was something that you sent me in an email. I can't remember now. But there was someone who said that they had seen a Bigfoot walk across the road in front of their car between Blue Diamond and the state park that's up there. Is it Valley of Fire? No, it's not Valley of Fire. Is it Red Rocks?
Red Rock Canyon.
Yeah.
Are you going to be going back to Red Rock Canyon anytime soon?
I've got no plans to go back down into Vegas at all in the next foreseeable future, unless there's a compelling reason to drag me down there. You guys give me a compelling reason to come down there, and I'll pack up the car and come down for a weekend.
Well, we recently got a sighting came in that someone was seeing a Bigfoot looking in their windows at one of the houses in the outer edge of Blue Diamond, the one beside
that's recent?
Yeah, it was like within the last 2 or 3 months.
Oh, no kidding. How did they describe it? Kind of the same way that they describe all the other sand yetis?
The way they wrote, they said it was a big, hairy thing is the way they worded it. And I said, so you sure this wasn't a bear or a goat or one of the burros that's in town? She said, no. I know I've lived here for about 20 years, and I know what I've seen. It was a hairy thing. She said the only thing I could put my mind on it was that it was a Sasquatch, was what she said. But I guess she said it was in the middle of the night. She was getting ready to go to bed, and that's when it was looking in the window, I guess, in their kitchen window or something like that. Without pulling it up, that's what I remember about it.
That's pretty interesting. If she's lived in the desert for 20 years, and she knows what lives out there. She knows what there is and what there isn't. That's pretty interesting. Had she heard about any other sightings from Blue Diamond, from other residents?
I didn't ask her about if she had heard any other sightings, because we're still waiting for her to write us back, because I think, I don't know if she's going to write us back or not, but I know we've collected, I'd say probably like a dozen reports from Blue Diamond about.
Just from Blue Diamond. See, isn't that amazing? I find that incredibly fascinating.
The thing that's strange about Blue Diamond, like you were saying, is it doesn't look like something like that would live there, but back in Red Rock Canyon, there really is giant trees and, like you were saying, water sources and things like that back in the canyon.
Yep. Someone, I am actually looking at the chat room too. I see Tom Cantrell. He's another Facebook friend of mine. He's talking about the bighorn sheep. There are lots of those. There are all those wild mules that are out there as well. There's plenty of stuff for these Bigfoot to eat. I think that we always assume that if we can't live out there, if you as an individual don't think that you could live out there, that you automatically assume or you project that no other thing could live out there, when we know clearly that isn't the case. One of the interesting questions that I ask people that I speak to either on the phone or face-to-face is I do ask them if they have heard of any other sighting reports. And I tell you what, in almost every single instance, they have another lead or another story that they can relate to me. They may not know the person's name or their phone number, But these people that have had an experience, they get pretty vocal, and they're willing to tell their stories, and it's just a matter of time before somebody else they talk to also has a story or has heard of one. And so that seems to be kind of one of the interesting ways that I'm finding additional stories, is just asking the simple question, so you've had this experience, have you heard of anybody else that's had an experience? And generally it leads to another one.
I was going to say, I think last time you were on the show, we talked about Mount Potosi. It's over by Blue Diamond. Did we mention that to you?
I can't remember that. Now I should have gotten my Nevada Atlas out, because I knew we were going to talk about Nevada. I'm going to look for it here right now, real quick.
Oh,
Tell me about Mount Potosi.
Like you're on your way to Pahrump. It's like that mountain area you drive through.
Oh, right. So is that like the canyon that's on the south side of Red Rocks?
Yeah, it's like when you're on the freeway going into Pahrump, you have to pass through the Potosi Pass area.
Right. Okay.
Well, we've been doing a lot in that area since we talked to you last. Because if you actually go up in the mountains, there's a Boy Scout camp out there. We get permission to go up in the mountains up back there, I guess.
Oh, cool.
It's like, basically, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like Mount Charleston up there, where it's a whole different type of scenery than Red Rock Canyon.
It's amazing. That Mount Charleston area isn't like anywhere else in Las Vegas until you get, in my opinion, west to the Sierra Nevada, or more east and northeast up into the Great Basin area. That Mount Charleston is pretty rich country for Sasquatch to live in. I found my Utah Atlas, my Idaho Atlas, and my Wyoming Atlas. I couldn't find my Nevada Atlas.
Well, let's say, Nick, while Michael tries to find the map, did you want to tell him about some of the stuff we've done at Blue Diamond or Potosi?
Yeah, we've gone out to Blue Diamond, Potosi on a good number of occasions. One time, I wasn't able to go on this. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. I was not able to go on this expedition trip that Brent, Jeremy, and Tim took out, but they went to Blue Diamond to just kind of do a scanning of the area, and they actually had a very wild experience. Do you mind? We might have talked about this last time, but do you want to recap about that, Jer?
I'll tell him. Well, it was in the middle of the night. This is one of the very first times we started looking in Blue Diamond after we were getting these reports in. And there's like a little park in the center of town. We were just sitting in this park, kind of just talking about what our game plan was for the night. And all of a sudden we heard a vocalization coming from one of the mountains nearby, or I'm not really sure how to explain it, because you've seen how it's surrounded by mountains. It was coming from one of the mountains nearby, and it was very loud, almost as if it was very close, whatever it was. I'd say, how far away do you think that was, Brent?
I don't know. It sounded like it was at least 200 yards away at least, but it was really loud.
So was it over there to the west of Blue Diamond?
Where was it? It was in a park that was in the center of the Blue Diamond town.
Well, would you say that the sound came from over that ridge that's on the west side of town?
That's what I was thinking.
You know what? That's what I thought too. Yeah. It's because there's like a bunch of newer homes up on the mountain, like you said, I think towards that west ridge.
Right.
Yeah, so I think, my personal opinion, I believe it was right over those hills. But it sounded like something you would hear right up on, like an online Sasquatch, like when people record those vocalizations.
No kidding.
No, yeah, it sounded just something like that, but it was incredible. Because we know the sound of, like, the bighorn sheep that go to town and everything. We know the sound of them and all the goats and everything. But yeah, this is just something else I've never heard in my life before.
See, that's one of the things that I like to do when I go out. In fact, over this weekend, I did some. We were all watching Finding Bigfoot, all my little nieces and nephews, and I taught them how to scream like a Bigfoot, and they all thought that was cool. And so after the show was over, we're actually, this cabin is on a golf course where a woman related a story that she had an experience that she had earlier in her life. So I told the kids about this sighting at this golf course that we're staying right on. Of course, they didn't believe me, but I said, we've learned how to scream like Bigfoot now. Let's go out on the patio and let's scream for Bigfoot and see if we can hear anything. And so one of the reasons I like to do calls occasionally is to see what animals there are out there. When I screamed off of the porch, every dog up and down the gully there started barking at me. But a lot of times you'll get coyotes yipping at you. It's just interesting to see what kind of animals are out there. You can't see, but you can hear them, and they can certainly hear you.
Yeah.
What was it? One thing I'd like to ask was, I know last time we talked to you, said that you were experimenting with different types of call blasting, is what you were saying, or you didn't do it that much? Let's say,
no.
Did you change your opinion on that, or do you still not call blast?
No, I don't call blast. I don't have the time or the energy to buy a call blaster or whatever. I don't know what you even buy, a speaker and a tape recorder. I just don't have the time or the energy for that. I've got enough crap to carry around with big tripods and cameras and camping gear if I'm out for the night that I don't have time to worry about a speaker and a tape recorder. I'll let other people do that.
Well, you could evaluate on that a little bit. Something I was wondering was, do you think that call blasting, do you think that the Bigfoots know the difference between a recorded call versus a person, like you were saying, just doing like a scream that, just like you yourself doing a scream?
Oh, I don't know. I think a lot of times this conjecture about what Bigfoots know and what they don't know is worthless. But I do know this, that if I'm talking to a human being and I say hello, and they answer me back hello, and then I say hello to them again, and I just keep saying hello, 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 quite quickly they're going to know that something's up with me, either what I'm telling them, either I'm crazy or schizophrenic or whatever. So I know that a lot of the repertoire, let's say, of the call recordings that you can blast is quite limited. So let's say you're having a conversation with your friend and you're saying, how you doing? Oh, yeah, I'm great. Where'd you go this weekend? Oh, yeah, I'm great. How's your mother? Oh, yeah, I'm great. Keep saying the same thing over and over, you're going to figure that there's something wrong with the conversation, and you're going to get bored pretty quickly. So the samurai chatter thing, I think that's a bunch of I don't know what I think that is. I read it, and I'm a lurker and a stealthy lurker on all these different little blogs and websites and stuff. I figure that I have to familiarize myself with the lingo and the repertoire of people that are going out, what they are doing, what's working and what's not working. But for the most part, call blasting for me is a novelty. I'll do it just to see if what I can hear. I'll do it on the off chance that something will return a call. I'll bang a stick together or two just to see if anything's out there. But for the most part, I don't worry about it. I'm more concerned with paying attention to the light and listening to see what what I need to do as far as getting the right photograph is concerned. So in that sense, I guess I'm not really a researcher. I don't know if this term researcher is thrown about too easily. I guess I consider myself a Bigfoot story researcher, not a Bigfoot researcher.
Something that I think I might have asked you last time you were on the show. What made you investigate Bigfoot versus paranormal, like ghosts or UFOs or things like that?
Oh, I think that Bigfoot. Again, I'm not researching Bigfoot. I'm researching Bigfoot stories, and so the idea of the story is quite captivating to me. There's a lot of UFO stories, and those are cool, and you can choose to believe in them or not. And ghost stories. I consider myself somewhat spiritual and religious, and so I have my own take on ghosts. So I don't feel the need to pursue that. I think that so Bigfoot, I guess, kind of crosses this idea that it can be so creepy that it can't be real, but yet it's so real that it's really creepy, kind of a thing. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I just don't feel the need to go, prove that ghosts exist because I already think that they exist. and I don't feel the need to go chasing UFOs to find out if they exist because I already think they exist. I'd rather spend my energy and my time. And I'm a landscape photographer too. I don't want to go and photograph haunted mansions and basements, and I don't want to go photograph the night sky because people don't want to look at pictures of star trails and empty space. People would rather look at pictures of trees and rocks and a river going by. And I'd rather be in those places, quite frankly. So yeah, the whole photographing these locations where people have seen Bigfoot for me is much more rewarding than worrying about a door creaking being a ghost or a weird light in the sky being a UFO.
You're starting to break up a little bit again.
Am I in a bad part of my house?
It sounds like you start getting breaking off and on after like a little bit.
All right. Is that better?
Yeah, it's better. There's a guy named Mark in Ohio. He says there's a theory that Bigfoot might be an alien or could be an alien. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there was an episode of The $6 Million Man that took care of all that question, so I don't have to worry about that anymore. I don't want to dismiss this question because I think that there are a lot of people who honestly do believe that. I don't believe that Bigfoot was placed here by aliens. I don't believe that Bigfoot was placed here by other races traveling in a spaceship. I think Bigfoot has much more rational, earthly-based origins than for an alien to have brought it here in a spaceship.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say.
I appreciate the question. I like the idea that they're thinking about it. They're trying to connect the dots. I appreciate an inquiring mind that's asking interesting questions. So I apologize if I sound somewhat dismissive, but I don't go there with my idea about what Bigfoot is or why he's here.
So, what's a good one? Do you believe that Bigfoot travels in packs, or do you think that they travel by themselves, like single?
Oh, I believe there's probably some sort of a family aspect to Bigfoots. You see that in a lot of other, apes and monkeys and whatnot. You see that in us. When a woman has a child, they don't immediately abandon the child. They take care of it for a few years and they teach it how to live and how to function in society and in the world. I would imagine a Bigfoot does the same thing. So in that regard, you'd probably find a Bigfoot hanging out with a baby from time to time. There are a lot of sightings of those things happening. With someone sees a Bigfoot with at least one or two, younger Bigfoots. There's a story that comes from an area called Monte Cristo here in Utah. Just come in within the past year. A woman was talking about a line of Bigfoot tracks that she was following, and she looked down and she saw all of a sudden a second set of smaller Bigfoot tracks appear next to the larger set of Bigfoot tracks. So one can kind of surmise that possibly the mother was carrying the child and put it down and let it walk for a while. So there are sighting reports of them being in family groups, adults and children together. I don't think it's outside the realm of sane thinking. Here we are talking about sane thinking and Bigfoot. I don't know if you can do that at the same time, but I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility that Bigfoots would travel at least in a family group. And, fathers and sons and fathers and daughters and mothers and daughters have gone hunting for thousands of years. In human time, I don't see why a Bigfoot will be any different. So hunting in a pack would be, kind of a family outing, I think, for a family of Bigfoot. That would be what they would do every day. They would be hunting as a family.
Well, I know last time we talked to you, we told you about a Bigfoot sighting that we had in Northern California where we actually seen a Bigfoot, well, me and Brent did, we seen a Bigfoot cross a road, but we seen the one Bigfoot, but we heard footsteps around us in the forest, like there was at least 2 or 3 others.
Yeah, interesting. That doesn't surprise me a bit. Where was that in Northern California? Where was that at?
It was right by Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, there's a long tradition of Bigfoot there, that's for sure.
A question again on our Facebook. It says, last time you were on the show, you mentioned that you do your research, or you collect your reports by yourself. What makes you not want to join a group?
Politics and bickering and infighting and all the crap that goes with group mentality. I see these people fight back and forth. I see this person does this and that person does this, and before long they're all fighting. And I don't, like I said, I don't have that much time or energy to worry about the politics of who's doing what. I could care less about it, actually. I just want to go out and meet people that have seen something cool and go to that part of the forest and sit down and eat a snack and take a picture. It's honestly, it's just politics. I mean, I've joined a few websites just so that I can get on and I can read the reports and I can see what their members are saying, but I'm not affiliated with any, official or even, somewhat quasi-unofficial Bigfoot researching group. I'm not interested at all.
Sorry if the questions are jumping around a little bit. We're just getting them periodically here and there from, because we got another one that said, this is regarding you saying that you're a little afraid of what might happen if you've seen a Bigfoot. Someone was asking, if you did see a Bigfoot, would you follow it or track it? Like after you've seen it, would you follow it and take pictures of it, or?
Well, this camera that I use to take pictures with takes about 10-15 minutes to set up and focus and take a picture with it. So the idea of me photographing a Bigfoot is remote at best. So I'm not too concerned about capturing photographic evidence of Bigfoot. But if I saw one and I felt like I was safe, yeah, I'd probably follow the tracks and try and figure out how far apart the tracks were and how big the footprint was and kind of just see where it went. I don't consider myself incredibly cowardly. I go to remote places of the country and of the world, honestly, alone quite often. But I don't feel the need to set myself up for a dangerous or potentially dangerous situation with a Bigfoot. Even though we all have never heard of a scenario where one has attacked a human being. I'm happy to. I think I would be happy to just let them wander on their way and say thanks for coming by and thanks for letting me see you. I would probably talk to it. I would probably try to talk to it a little bit. I don't think that there's anything wrong with saying thank you. We when I grew up with horses. We talk to our horses all the time. We talk to our dogs and our pets all the time. They can tell when there's a friendly tone of voice from a human being. I don't think a Sasquatch would be any different. So yeah, I'd probably tell it thanks and have a good day and that kind of stuff.
I was going to say, did you have a question for Michael, Brent? Sorry, I haven't asked you in a while. I just wondered.
Not really. I've just been listening to him talk. Sorry about
last
that.
time you were on the show, you mentioned that you used to live in Colorado, and I was wondering, have you ever heard of Bigfoot in the Fairplay or the Minturn, Colorado area?
No, I don't know those areas hardly at all. My father grew up in a town called Red Mesa, which is just south of Durango, and he grew up a sheep herder. His family had a sheep and a dairy ranch in Red Mesa, and they had sheep grazing land up in the San Juans, north of Mancos, Colorado. And so I actually have been curious about what he may have experienced. He would spend the entire summers up in the mountains alone, literally alone, with the sheep. And so he tells stories about scaring off creatures in the night that he'd heard, and I kind of press him for details. And he's 72 now, so it's been a while ago that he was doing this as a kid. But it is pretty interesting that there are several Bigfoot experiences that are related that come out of the San Juan Mountains, which is where he was herding sheep. So so I pay attention to that part of Colorado, that southwestern corner of Colorado, and that northwestern part of New Mexico, the Bloomington and Farmington area. But no, I don't know the particular places in Colorado that you're talking about.
Yeah, because we got a bunch of reports from the Minturn and Fairplay, Colorado area, and we went up there last summer to go look for Bigfoot and do that sort of thing. I was just curious if you knew of that area.
Tell me where that is.
It's, let me think. It's over by, it's to the west of Denver, but east of Glenwood Springs and Colorado Springs. Kind of in between. And it's kind of in central Colorado.
No, I don't know that part of Colorado at all, actually.
Oh, really?
That's one of the things that I really like about this project for me, is that I get these reports in, and I can't predict or I can't control where they come from. So I really like the idea that I get to learn about different parts of Utah. It takes me to places that I'd never go before. So, I mean, that's cool that you know about Minturn, Colorado. I would have never heard about Blue Diamond, Nevada, had I not talked with you folks, before. So I really like that about this project.
Well, what was interesting was when we got back from our trip, when we actually came back home, like not even a month later, there was a TV show on the History Channel where they were in Minturn, Colorado. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
That's funny, yeah. Well, the thing...
I don't think I asked you this last time. Have you ever taken photos or collected any reports about Sasquatch nests or where they stay?
I haven't. I haven't personally heard anything like that, but one of the guys that I've kind of worked with, his name is Dave Carver. He's quite infamous in northern Utah. He and another gentleman named Brad Corliss, they're my other two kind of Bigfoot buddies. They have gone up into an area called the North Ogden Divide, and they've hiked around quite a bit, and they are talking, or they're telling me about some tree structures that they found. So I don't know if a tree structure is the same as what you would consider a nest, but I've never heard of any reports talking about where a Bigfoot would bed down or sleep.
And speaking of the nests, you mentioned stick breaks or stick formations earlier. What do you think those are?
Oh, I don't know. I think they could be all kinds of things. Trail markers, I think, is an obvious one. A lot of smart people that study monkeys and stuff talk about the gorillas and monkeys will do tree breaks to indicate safe trails. A lot of people are thinking that they're warning markers, stay away or whatever, or they pull a tree down to cross a trail to keep you away. I don't know. I guess I kind of have a hard time projecting, a 21st century human being's experience into that of a Bigfoot. I'll say this. I liken it to the theory of, in Utah we have lots and lots of rock art, lots of petroglyphs and pictographs. And one of my major professors in school, named Craig Law, he's been photographing, southern Utah rock art for dozens of years. If anybody, is going to find out what these things mean, it's going to be him or one of these people that he talks to on a regular basis. Nobody knows what any of that rock art means. We can all guess and we can all, speculate, but really nobody knows what they mean because we can't talk to the people who made them. I think the exact same thing is true for the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch. We can guess all we want what that tree structure or the stick breaks or those cross trees or whatever, what they mean, but we'll never know until we can, say, hey, Bigfoot, how's it going? Hey, what's this mean? Oh, that's cool. It's kind of a joking, answer, but I think until we can, have a conversation with one, we're never going to know what they mean.
With your research, how many of your reports come from the desert regions of Utah?
Very few, very, very few. Let me think. After I'd spoken with you, I actually went out to Wendover, Nevada, and drove south of Wendover about 40 miles and took a photograph down there, kind of between Wendover and, what's the next town south? I can't even remember now. Anyway, that's one of the few sighting reports that I've heard from the desert area, and it actually was kind of in a mountainous region, honestly. South of Wendover is pretty pretty tall mountains. There is a sighting report from northwest of St. George, Utah, that's in a little mountainous canyon area. There's even a sighting report from down near Escalante, Utah, a sighting of a white Bigfoot down there. But those are there are not very many sightings from the desert regions of Bigfoot, which is one of the things that I think is so cool about your area, over in Blue Diamond. I mean, that is the desert. I don't know of any places that are much more deserty than there. So that's cool. I think that they're, even in that remote, inhospitable terrain, that they're there as well.
I was going to say, your friend's talking to you in the chat, Mike.
Who's my friend? Let me go look and see. I'm kind of pacing around.
He's talking about your stick formations, what you were talking about.
Oh. That's not entirely true. Well, Tom's one of those guys that does a lot of research, and he's got his theories he subscribes to, and that's the other thing that I think is cool is we all kind of have our own take on it. Yeah, Tom may know of some research that I haven't found or that I haven't come across. He has a corner of the world that he studies that I don't, in the same way that I have a corner of the world that I study that he doesn't. And so that's one of the things that I think is interesting about this whole Bigfoot deal is we can all kind of decide what we want to pay attention to and what we don't want to pay attention to. So if there are people that have theories or if they somehow have figured out what the stick structures and the tree breaks mean, then that's awesome. But I don't know. I can't tell anybody definitively that I know what they mean. I mean, that was the question that was posed to me. Do I think I know what they mean? And I don't.
Yeah.
And until I can talk to a Bigfoot, I don't think I'll ever know what they mean. Other people may think they know what they mean, but, that's up to them to decide that.
Have you ever been to Fish Lake, Utah, or heard of any reports coming out of there?
Yes, there are several reports out of Fish Lake. The BFRO website actually has been a pretty good place for me to go and find reports. That's a good clearinghouse, I think, of information of all kinds all over the country. And on their site, there's at least one or two Fish Lake sightings, and I believe, if memory serves me correctly, they're on opposite sides of the lake. Fish Lake is also an oh, go ahead.
Sorry, you could keep going.
Fish Lake is an area where an old college buddy of mine, he goes and fishes there all the time, and so one of these days I'm going to have him take me up there and show me the lake so that I can photograph those locations. But yeah, Fish Lake, it's pretty remote. It's high elevation. I think you're maybe above 6,000 feet there. High mountain lake, plenty of fish. If there's not a Bigfoot up there, I would be surprised.
Because we were planning a trip to go do. There supposedly people were saying that they had seen a lot of lake monster sightings over the last 50 years around that area, and we were going to plan a trip there. I just seen there's a bunch of Bigfoot sightings were coming up, and I thought you'd be interested in that if you haven't heard about it already.
Oh, yeah. If you guys are going to Fish Lake, I'll meet you in Fish Lake. That'd be cool to get together and fry some fish over the campfire. I didn't know there were any lake monster sightings from Fish Lake. That's new to me. But there are at least 2 sightings that I know of from Fish Lake. Have you heard of more?
I think I found about 4 or 5 of them.
Well, that's more than I know about them. That's cool.
Well, because we were going to rent a boat and all that, and randomly, when I was renting the boat, some story was coming about a guy had seen a Bigfoot in a boat that he had rented on that lake, and then I just kept looking it up from there.
So let's backtrack just half a second. He said that he saw a Bigfoot in a boat that he had rented. So is he saying that the Bigfoot was in the boat that he had rented, or that he was in the boat that he rented?
I know he was in the boat, and the Bigfoot was on the land somewhere.
Gotcha. So I do have to do a little bit of detective work sometimes when I hear something that doesn't make sense to me.
At first I thought you were asking if he rented the boat from the Bigfoot.
Well, it makes a lot of difference, the emphasis you place on the sentence and the words and whatnot. But, yeah, I'll go to Fish Lake and hang out with you guys anytime. That'd be awesome.
That'd be cool.
We were thinking maybe April. If we don't go in April, we're probably going to go in June or July, probably.
Well, there's not a lot of snow up there right now. We've had a really, really dry winter, so you could probably get up there in April. June would be great. July 4th weekend, of course, it's going to be way crowded up there. The July 24th weekend will also be quite crowded up there. So if I were you, I would try to sneak up there in June.
Because I know they only rent boats at certain times of certain months. So I'd have to see which weeks they let you rent boats on.
Oh, right. And I don't own a boat, and I don't know anyone that would let me drag their boat up to look for a lake monster. But yeah, let me know when you guys are there. That'd be cool.
Well, yeah, definitely. If you're around the area, we definitely keep in touch with you.
Definitely.
On that note, this is just a random question. Would you be interested in taking pictures of, say, the lake if there was a lake monster, or are you just strictly on Bigfoot?
Oh, I think lake monsters are interesting. There is a lot of information about lake monsters that lend some quite a bit of credence to those. And honestly, there wouldn't be much difference between me taking a picture of a lake where Bigfoot was sighted and a lake where a lake monster was sighted. It would still include some trees and some shoreline and some lake. So yeah, there wouldn't be. I mean, you could probably even use the two pictures interchangeably. If there was a lake monster sighting report, you could use the same photograph for that and the Bigfoot report.
That's true.
So yeah, the answer would be no. I'm not averse to taking pictures of lakes where there are lake monster sightings. My project, however, does not deal with lake monsters whatsoever. So in that sense, if I took a picture of a lake monster, a lake where a lake monster had been, I wouldn't know what to do with it because my project doesn't overlap that category. I've been to Lake Champlain, I've been to Lake Okanagan, I've been to lakes in Sweden where there have been lake monsters. Bear Lake has a lake monster tradition. So I've had my fair share of opportunities to photograph places where there have been lake monsters, but it just hasn't been something that's drawn me as strongly as photographing areas where Bigfoot has been seen.
You'd have to start the Utah Lake Monster website.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I got to tell you, I've got at least 4 or 5 projects at the same time, and one more is not going to do me any good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
as a matter of fact, I'm working on my newest project right now. Go ahead.
Oh no, you can go ahead. Sorry, I'll say.
No, that's fine. I was just going to say I'm working on my newest project right now. I'm putting together and restoring a camera from 1909. So there's always something to be working on. All right, Mark from Ohio, let's hear it.
What would you tell somebody who said that they didn't believe in Bigfoot?
I'd say that is wonderful. We live in America, where you can still have a freedom of opinion and a freedom of speech, and you can choose what you want to believe in, and you can choose what you don't want to believe in. So thank you for considering it, and thank you for deciding you don't want to believe in Bigfoot. And I'd ask them what they do believe in. What do you believe in? What are some things that interest you? But yeah, I don't take it personally if somebody says they don't believe in Bigfoot. I'm not out to prove that Bigfoot exists. I'm not on a crusade.
He's asking, what reports would you try to show him, or if you would, to try to convince him that it was real? I think he just said that.
Oh, I don't know. I think that if somebody tells you that they don't believe in Bigfoot, they probably don't even want to talk about it. So showing him evidence or reports or studies or anything else like that would be a waste of your time. If they wanted to have a conversation about Bigfoot, what do you think about Bigfoot? And they asked me, I'd say, well, this has been pretty cool that I found this and I found that, and people will dismiss whatever scientific evidence you throw at them. So I kind of tend to bring it back to the personal element, and I tell them about stories that I've heard from other eyewitnesses. And I say, okay, you tell me how you're going to explain this. How do you justify this experience that this person had? Oh, well, they were doing this or they were doing that. And, I think when it comes down to it is you can't have a conversation. It's like religion, right, or politics. If the person doesn't believe the same things that you believe, a lot of times the conversation just is a exercise in futility. I don't have a go-to list of 20 things that I will show people to prove that Bigfoot exists. But, if somebody wants to talk about it rationally, my next-door neighbor up the street, he went and bought Meldrum's book because he saw me reading it on a camp out that we had this summer. So he's been pretty interested in it. He, reads the footprints chapter, and then he comes to me and is like, oh, yeah, I read that, and what do you think about that? Oh, that was pretty cool. And so we're having an educated, honest dialogue about what Bigfoot is, rather than me trying to debate or to prove, what Bigfoot is or what Bigfoot isn't.
Well, Flycat in the chat room is asking me, he says, he wants me to ask you if you've seen any Bigfoot footprints or if you've photographed any.
I've never seen, this is how weak my experience with Bigfoot has been. I've never seen a Bigfoot track. I've never heard a Bigfoot scream. I've never smelled a Bigfoot smell. I've never seen a Bigfoot anything, fur, shadow, eyes, nothing. I have no personal, anecdotal story or evidentiary issue, no. The answer is no. I've never seen anything that leads me to believe that there truly, honestly is a Bigfoot. I think it'd be totally awesome, though.
If you did see a track, would you take a picture of it?
Oh, I'd probably have to. The Bigfoot nerd in me would ultimately win out. I can't imagine that I would see a track and not take a picture of it. For a while last summer, I thought I would make a little tracking kit where I would get some plaster and some water and some bags, some paper bags to collect evidence in, and some rubber gloves, and keep that in my car all the time. And I just never gotten around to doing it. But yeah, I'd probably take a picture of the footprint and stick my foot next to it and say, yeah, check it out. Size 10 versus size 80.
So is there any certain time of the year or any certain season where you get more sighting reports coming into your website?
Well, I think it just goes along with human activity outside. I think most people are out in the mountains in the summer, so you get more sightings during the summer months. There are quite a few sighting reports that come during elk and deer hunting season. Not very many reports in the winter. But yeah, I would say most of them come around in the spring through fall when people are outside in the areas that Bigfoot inhabit. Which is unfortunate because
Bigfoot hibernates?
No, Bigfoot doesn't hibernate.
You don't think so?
No, I don't think Bigfoot hibernates. Again, I can't say definitively because I've never met one and said, hey, what do you do in the winter? But I don't think Bigfoot hibernates. I think they might migrate. I think they might leave an area where it's hard to live and follow the food source. I mean, if they don't follow the food source, they're going to be awfully hungry, and winters are long in Utah. But I don't think they hibernate. One of the other reasons I don't think they hibernate is because we can find dens where bears hibernate. That they're pretty easy to find. And unless a bear and a Bigfoot use the same hibernating location or the same strategy, I think it's somewhat frivolous for us to say that they hibernate. I don't think that bears eat a lot in the fall months, getting ready for hibernation. And I don't think that the sighting reports of Bigfoot would indicate that they put on fat in the fall months to get ready to go to sleep in the winter. I just haven't heard. I mean, I've heard that theory off and on. I don't see any evidence to really back it up strongly in the stories that I've heard. Like I didn't see a big fat Bigfoot in October getting ready to go to bed. Mm-hmm. They kind of all tend to talk about the Bigfoot body structure in a similar way, regardless of the time of the year that they see them. Plus, I think if you look at the ways that bears hibernate, they're largely lethargic. They might come out of the den for a few hours just to kind of stretch their legs and get out a little bit. But when people see bears that are hibernating in the winter, if they're out of their den, they're very slow and they're cumbersome. They're not on their A game. And when we hear about Bigfoot sightings in the winter, they're just as fast, they're just as nimble. They're just as elusive and stealthy as they are when we see them in the summer. So I don't see any behavioral difference in a Bigfoot in the winter versus the summer. So I don't know if I put any weight into the theory that Bigfoot hibernate.
One of my co-hosts has a question for you.
Okay.
Oh, okay, Mike. I was going to ask you. I know we've been asking you a lot of questions. Do you have any questions for us at all, by any chance?
Well, what do you guys think they hibernate? Because they don't hibernate now in Nevada. It doesn't get that cold.
I don't think they hibernate. That was just a guest question on our Facebook.
Yeah, I don't think they hibernate either. Do I have any questions for you guys? Yeah, how come you guys are finding out about sighting reports in Utah that I don't find out about? That's bugging me. I'm totally jealous.
I'm not sure. I know Jeremy usually checks all because we have like a team email set up for like sighting reports, and I know he usually tells me because he mostly checks all the emails regarding that.
Do you get a lot from Utah?
We have, actually, to tell you the truth, most of them are from Colorado and Utah, and then we have some from Nevada, but not as many as the Utah and the Colorado.
Oh, that's interesting. Tell you what, I'll meet you guys in Fish Lake, and I'll make you dinner, and I'll take a picture of Fish Lake for you guys to use in your project if you promise to send me all of your Utah Bigfoot sighting reports.
Okay.
I'll put you on the spot.
I won't see a problem, and I'll ask our friend Nick, because what usually happens is I get the emails as they come in, and then Nick's the one that follows up with them and usually calls them and asks them all the questions and all that.
Oh, cool.
I think he just went to work about 15 minutes ago, but I'll ask him when he gets home from work, probably in a few hours.
All right, you kick him in the butt for me. You say, hey, Slade wants your sighting report stories.
Well, One thing that we thought would be interesting would be if we got a picture, like all of us got a picture we put up on our website, is one thing that we were thinking.
Oh, like a group shot of all of us hanging out and being
if we met up
at the mountain?
If we did meet up at Fish Lake, if we took a picture and put it up on our website or something.
Oh, of course, yeah, that kind of stuff's fun to do. A little group shot hanging out on the shores of the Fish Lake.
Yeah.
And maybe happen to catch a lake monster in the background too.
In the background, that's right. So that's the other thing that I'm seeing a lot of people on the internet will do is they'll take pictures that they find on the internet, and then they'll go back and they'll scour those pictures for evidence of other Bigfoot. So I occasionally I find myself looking, peering into the trees of my own pictures, like, what do I see in the background? Do I see anything that's lurking in the shadows?
Yeah, we do the same thing too when we go out.
So far nothing.
Yeah, same here. But yeah, I think it's fascinating that you, like you said, you're a professional photographer, because I had actually worked at a retail photo lab for close to almost 4 years.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
did anybody come in with like interesting stuff on their film?
Sometimes. Most of the time when I was doing retail, but most of the time people would just be taking pictures of their children and grandchildren and stuff like that. But
right.
You got some cool ghost photos up.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Awesome.
That he
I got into it. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I know, I was done.
I got into an interesting conversation about a week ago with a guy. He was a ghost hunter guy, and of course, when I see people on the internet make a post regarding what a camera can't and what it cannot do, if I disagree with their position, I get kind of sucked into the argument or the conversation. I probably said a little bit too much to this gentleman, but it's hard to keep my nose out of a discussion regarding cameras and Bigfoot or ghosts. That's the nerd in me. I'm just a big camera nerd.
I was going to say, Tim actually owns some old cameras and things like that. I'm not exactly sure what models or anything, but
yeah, I have a couple Minolta models. I have 2 Minoltas from the 1970s, but I can't recall the exact models.
I love those old cameras. When I teach the black and white film class right now at BYU, and the student asks me what kind of camera they need for the class, and I say, you go to the pawn shop and you find the oldest mechanical film camera you can and bring it back, and that'll be perfect for my class. So I love those old cameras. They're awesome.
Oh, yeah, me too. I love, like you said, I don't mind digital or anything, but I still prefer film myself, too.
Yeah. It's a little different. It's a little different feel, a little different mindset.
Plus, I like you said, the whole aspect of developing it and everything, too, is pretty neat, too.
Oh, I tell you what, here's what I spent my day yesterday doing. I'm helping an old mentor of mine liquidate his camera estate. And we spent the morning going through and inventorying and selling the cameras to a collector from New York who flew in to Salt Lake to look at this collection. And then we went to lunch. He and his wife and I went to lunch, and then we came back and we cleared out chemistry from his darkroom that dates back to before 1900.
Dang.
Wow.
Jars and jars, and I borrowed a buddy's pickup truck, and we had that truck full. The whole bed was full of 50-pound drums of powdered this and powdered that, and just really cool trip down memory lane, photo history memory lane, literally, with my instructor who's 82, who lived through a lot of that history of photography. So that was really awesome.
Oh yeah, that is.
Well, we
cool.
have another question coming from our chat room. Flycatch was asking me now. He says, "Do you use topographic maps to correlate?" Sorry, I can't hardly say that right now. Do you use topographic maps with your research?
Oh yeah, I'm a map junkie. I'm a total map slut. I love maps. If I can find new maps or old maps, I love them all. So yeah, I'll use topo maps all the time. I love the benchmark atlases; those are great. I love the 1 to 100,000 scale USGS maps; those are awesome. Back in the day when I was doing a lot of off-road photography and a lot of off-road exploration, I bought a lot of digital maps, like the National Geographic maps that you would put on your computer and use those. And I went through a few generations of those digital maps before I really realized that I don't like digital maps anymore. I like the kind that I can fold out and I can put on the trunk of the truck or the hood of the truck and kind of plot my spot from A to B to C to D and spread all these maps out and really just kind of get a feel for the area. Instead of looking at a 17-inch laptop screen, I can look at a 2.5 by 3.5 foot map. Get a much better idea of where it is that I'm going. So yeah, I love topo maps.
We have about 8 minutes left in the show. I have a few more questions.
Shoot. Go.
I think we asked you this earlier. Have you ever collected any reports of a violent or an aggressive Sasquatch?
I haven't collected any, but I heard one story last summer from someone that we all know, and I won't mention this person by name. But they talked about a story that is unpublished and that's not talked about a lot, that comes from an Indian reservation, about a woman who was kidnapped and impregnated by a Bigfoot and then left that Indian reservation in Wyoming, was sent to an Indian reservation in Arizona to have the child. Well, later on, this particular researcher was talking to someone from the reservation in Arizona, and the story of this girl that came down from Wyoming came up. And the story about this child was actually delivered, and so on and so forth. That event was related to him in Wyoming by an independent source, and then related to him again in Arizona by an independent source, which made him really kind of wonder, could this possibly be true? And then this researcher also told me another story from Wyoming about a woman who was reported missing while she was out on her morning run. And the story goes that she was reported missing, and as the investigation from the police or the sheriff went on, that somebody came forward, two gentlemen that knew this woman, said that they had a Bigfoot sighting where they saw the creature on the side of the road with a woman wearing clothes that matched the description of the woman that went missing on her run. Those are the only two stories that I'd heard that involved any violence towards human beings. I don't want to mention this researcher by name. I don't know any written report where that can be verified or anything like that. It was surprising for me, and I'll be honest with you, it was surprising for me to hear those stories of violence against a human being from a Sasquatch, from a person that I trust and respect, because I had never heard any other stories that even came close to that. We'd heard, rock throwing and growling and screaming and that kind of thing, but I'd never heard a story that involved physical violence from a Bigfoot to a human being. So that was surprising to me.
Did you have a question about the story, Brent?
You're putting me on the spot.
It sounded like you were going to ask a question when you were talking.
Oh no, I was just listening to the story.
Well, have you noticed with reports you've collected, is there more reports around waterways or lakes than other areas?
No, it's kind of funny. I tell my students and my friends that I'm doing this project, I say a lot of times it's really boring because I drive up to a site and all I get to shoot is a road. All I get to shoot is a picture of a road, because that's where most of the sightings happen, is someone's driving down the road and one walks, or runs right in front of their car. So that's a bit of a photographic challenge, is to make a picture of a road interesting to look at. So I'm going to say that most of the sighting reports that I get involve someone seeing one out of their window of their car that walks right in front of them.
So you said you live in the Orem area?
I live in Riverton, Utah, which is between Orem and Salt Lake City. It's kind of
is there a lot of sightings from that area? I was going to say, 'cause I thought that area was built up really big.
Well, there are some interesting sightings from this area. There are a lot of houses in the area now, but I found a story that I just put on my blog a couple of weeks ago from a canyon that's very near me called Butterfield Canyon, and it actually comes from Tom Cantrell. He and a friend of his saw one in Butterfield Canyon while they were hunting deer. That's one from the east side of the Ochre Mountains. That's the mountain range that's on the west side of the Salt Lake Valley. There are also some sightings from a town called Ophir, which is a little silver mining town on the other side of the Ochre Mountains. One of my students in a class that I taught this last year, he related a story from a woman that ran a dairy farm on the west side of Utah Lake. She had a Bigfoot sighting of one that she saw from her home on this dairy farm. And there actually are at least 2 or 3 other sighting reports in Utah that come from dairy farms, which is, a small sample size, but the coincidence is interesting that there are sighting reports around a dairy. So there are quite a few sighting reports from the west side of the Salt Lake Valley as well, yeah.
Well, we have about two minutes left in the show. I was going to say, is there any certain updates on your project you wanted to mention, or any sort of your website or any of that?
Yeah, I've got some two new stories that have come in within the past couple of weeks that are interesting. I'm just kind of nailing down the details, and I'll be posting those, the written reports anyway. I haven't photographed either of those locations yet. One of the reports comes from an area called Christmas Valley, which is up in the Uintas, and a sighting report came from there from a gentleman in his suburban years ago. A sighting report came from my student, and then another sighting report from the same exact valley, a very small area, came from a daughter of a close friend of mine. And I had no idea that she had seen a Bigfoot until I saw them at the Finding Bigfoot town meeting up in Logan over in November. So there's a lot. People discount Utah as a sighting location or a sighting area. I think we think about Ohio and Texas and, of course, Canada and Oregon and Washington. But, yeah, Utah, there's a lot going on in Utah that nobody really knows about.
That's very true.
Yeah.
But we have about a minute left in the show. I wanted to thank Michael Slade for calling into the show today. I wanted to thank all of my co-hosts that called in and guests that have asked questions. We have a lot of people asking to have you back on the show, and, of course, I told you you're one of our favorite guests. We'll probably have to have you on the show again in like a month or two.
Oh, I'm flattered.
Thanks,
let's do an interview. Let's do a show after we do a Fish Lake Camp Cookout. How's that?
We can. But yeah, we'll stay in touch. I'll let you know what happens with Nick when he gets off work. I'll probably email you with whatever he says, or I'll have him email you. That might be better.
Either way. Thanks a bunch, guys. This has been really fun.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, well.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thanks again, Mike.
Okay, Dave. Thanks, man.
All right. Thanks again.